Deep inside ourselves resides the religious impulse. Out of the passions of our clay, it rises. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, or self-derived. We have religion when we hold some hope beyond the present, some self-respect beyond our own failures. We have religion when our hearts are capable of leaping up at beauty, when our nerves are edged by some dream in the heart. We have religion when we have an abiding gratitude for all that we have received. We have religion when we look upon people with all their failings and still find in them good. When we look beyond people to the grandeur in nature and to the purpose in our own heart. We have religion when we have done all we can and then have the confidence to entrust ourselves to the life that is larger than ourselves.
It has been a truly dreadful week, and we cannot look away. As a religious community, we stand in a particularly useful location, I think. We can acknowledge that debates about politics and history of the Middle East or anywhere are only so useful and accomplish nothing really, not from where we are located. It's brain exercise. And instead of doing that, or in addition to doing that, we can urge ourselves to consider moral questions as they directly affect us. So in other words, something we can do. We can ask ourselves, what kind of human beings are we called to be? By what values do we determine our commitments? What sacrifices might those commitments require of us? On a practical level, where are we getting our information? What agendas and biases may be coming along with those sources? Who benefits economically from our believing in certain versions of the truth? How do we, this is perhaps, I think, the most important one for faithful people, how do we want to participate in the public conversation around these issues? In person, in our families, online? This has been hard for me. I have family in Israel. I have family, you know what I'm saying, okay? It's divisive. So I've had to ask myself that a lot. What spiritual practices can we engage to help us maintain those behavioral commitments and covenants? And finally, the religious community has a historic role as witnesses. Witnesses often cannot fix or solve or cure any tragedy. That's just the reality. The religious community standing in tradition knows that lamentation is a spiritual practice all its own and a legitimate response to ongoing violence to which our species is prone and seems to continually prefer. I lament with you. The atrocities that have been committed and are being committed in Israel and Palestine right now, unfortunately, provide me with too perfect a sermon illustration in reflecting on why so many people recoil at the idea of identifying themselves as religious and prefer the title of spiritual but not religious. I hear this a lot. You do too, I'm sure. It's been a popular identifier for a long time. And for me, for the years between, like I would say, 1997 to about 2010, when I did a lot of weddings, I would invariably find myself confronted by usually a young male guest who would introduce himself by announcing that, hey, you did a pretty good job with the ceremony. But he would always say, I'm not religious. I don't believe in organized religion. I'm spiritual but not religious. Like I would find this a shocking admission or original. I finally figured out that it was a form of flirting, but it took a really long time to figure that out. After earnestly engaging with these guys for years and years, I'd say, oh yeah, spiritual but not religious, sure. Well, let me tell you about organized religion that I'm part of. You know, they didn't want to hear about that. What they wanted, they didn't want to discuss anything. They wanted to make pronouncements about the evils and corruptions of all religious groups throughout history, and they wanted to use me as a straw man, a representative of all those bad, evil religions. So eventually I learned to respond to this confrontation with, I'm so happy for you. I totally support your being spiritual but not religious, and I'd love a glass of red wine. Thank you for asking. I mean, we were at a wedding reception after all. Christian pastor and author Lillian Daniel, who was kind of a rock star back in the mid-2000s, wrote a funny but scathing article for the Christian Century in 2011 called Spiritual but Not Religious? Please Stop Boring Me. She wrote about being confronted on airplanes in the ways that I had often experienced at weddings, and wrote, such a person will also always share this as if it's some kind of daring insight, unique to him, bold in its rebellion against the religious status quo. Sarcasm aside, her point was valid then and is more so today, because outside of the Bible Belt, I assume, and actually studies show or surveys show, that spiritual but not religious, SBNR, is such a common designation as to be wholly unremarkable. Lillian Daniel's critique of those who claim to be spiritual but not religious is sardonic, yeah, but it's fairly taken. Next thing you know, she wrote, he's telling me that he finds God in the sunsets. These people always find God in the sunsets or walks on the beach. Like people who go to church don't see God in the sunset. Later, in an even more pointed barb, she says, there's nothing challenging about having deep thoughts all by yourself. You are comfortably in the norm for self-centered American culture. Right smack dab in the bland majority of people who find ancient religions dull but find themselves uniquely fascinating. Oh, okay. That, to me, that last point is not fair, and I don't think it's accurate. To identify as spiritual but not religious is a way for people to distance themselves from the institutional failures of the established religious traditions, because there are so many, and to maintain a connection to the life of the Spirit and an interest and care for reverence and mystery. To do this together, which many of us are doing, it's a good idea to clarify then, what do I mean by spiritual? People grapple with that a lot. Spirituality, left as a vague entity with no parameters, can definitely become self-made religion, with no accountability where harmful ideas and practices can flourish. It can be shallow, unexamined, love and light slogans that encourage an emphasis on personal peace, completely unattached from what's going on in the world. That's not spirituality, that's escapism. I was so interested in Reverend Chris's sermon last weekend when he talked about, I don't know how many of you were there, but he talked about how he pursued a life of spiritual practice in India and discovered that he was using meditation as a way to transcend difficult emotions, what he called spiritual bypass, all the while convincing himself that he was attaining enlightenment. So, as Chris discovered for himself, that's one of the danger areas of spirituality. When we think of being spiritual as being above or beyond the messiness of the human struggle. We never are. We never are. And unless we're going to live in a cave in the Himalayas to dedicate ourselves entirely to meditation, we really shouldn't be and can't be. To live spiritually is to use practices of presence, compassion, mindfulness, to stay connected to the numinous, non-material facet of reality, the mysterious ground of being in which, as St. Paul said, in which we live and move and have our being. Spirituality is not about rising above life and its pain, but to abide with it, to remain awake to what is real. Along with that, spirituality carries along with it an appreciation for our own finitude. And it concerns itself with questions of ultimate meaning, but not necessarily within the strictures of doctrine. Whereas religiosity is reactionary, spirituality is reflective. For me personally, the definition of spirituality also involves a trust that love is an energy field, and therefore that our prayers, our good vibes, our concern, our gratitude, our devotion to loved ones and that which we hold worthy and dear to the animal and natural world, and even towards those we will never meet, past, present, and future, matter. So when we say we're holding somebody in love, that's a real force, and it matters. Your own definition of spirituality may have similarly mystical aspects, or maybe it doesn't. Finally, we're learning in the contemporary era now that spirituality has to be more and not less about connecting with our bodies. Westerners are learning, finally, to undo centuries of religious teaching that told us that the body is a dangerous beast needing to be tamed, repressed, and controlled by the purity of the spirit. We're lucky that indigenous traditions and non-Western religions have had such a richness of teachings and practices that have helped all who are interested in learning them attain integration of mind, body, and spirit. And lately, we've been very much aided by multidisciplinary research into the effects of trauma to better understand how our brains and our bodies create survival patterns. That is stress responses that short circuit our ability to create inner and external peace. I want to just let that land for a minute because we see the tragic consequences of that. But look, there are times when I can honestly say that I'm religious but not spiritual. That's been my joke for a while. You're spiritual but not religious. I'm religious but not spiritual today. Because there are times when I'm not able or perhaps willing to connect with the deeper source of reality, to the spirit. But what I can do in those times is I can open my Bible or sacred texts or a prayer book and utter some words that have been given to me by my tradition. And I can meditate on those old stories and let those ancient words speak for me because I can't find the words myself. I was in the Psalms all this past week because they speak of all of what's happening. They speak with great lamentation, anger, sorrow, And there they are for us if we should choose to engage in them. When my well is dry and I have zero sense of active reverence or awe, I have often attended a church service somewhere and entered into ancient practices that I know have ministered to generations of good people in the past and the present. Or because I am of Jewish heritage as well, I can recite the Kaddish or celebrate festivals of hope and liberation, and also delve into the Jewish Bible and argue with it as Jews have done for thousands of years. And because I have interfaith community, I am also have been welcomed into Muslim community and Sikh community and Buddhist community as a guest and offered the hospitality of their tradition. Certainly, if one thinks of religion as synonymous with doctrine, enforced conformity of thought or belief, and gods and saviors who save some people and damn the rest to hell, it's a matter of emotional survival to reject that wholesale. I understand that because the world needs none of that, and it has plenty of it. But this religious community is historically heretical and permanently non-doctrinal, with no enforced conformity of theological belief and no God concept that damns or excludes anyone. So there's that. What is more, I was taught that the etymology of the word religion is from the Latin religare, to tie or bind together. There are differences of opinion on that matter, but it's valid enough. And it's also really appealing. Religion can provide us with tradition, rituals and rites of passage handed down by generations that we can evolve. And there's a word. Okay, you know what I mean. When you revise, we can revise them, and we do. And those people face the same joys and sorrows, cataclysms, and confrontations with the evil that is the potential of all human beings. So perhaps you are spiritual but not religious. Perhaps you are religious but not spiritual. Perhaps you claim neither of these descriptors for yourself. What matters is not so much how we define ourselves, but what we do with our need to live the deeper life, to connect in reverence, and to be in community with other human beings who have the same struggles. Certainly, if you have arrived here this morning, there is a need you have acknowledged in yourself, even if deep down and largely unexplored, to do the spiritual life with other human beings and not to struggle through it all by yourself. Stay close. May we all stay close to the inclination that brings us together and honor it, for it is in this inclination that we resist forces of dehumanization. It is lovely to find the holy in sunsets. May we continue to experience that awe and that beauty. But it is together in spiritual community that we discern together what that awe and reverence asks of us, what that reverence, awe, gratitude, and love for this world encourages in us and demands of us. Dona nobis pacem. Grant us peace. A prayer from Shantiveda, an 8th century monk who had seen a few things. May I be a protector to those without protection, a companion for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. May we go in peace to love, to serve, to listen, until everyone is healed. Let the people say, Amen.